CIET NCERT presents Voyage of Charles Darwin. Now you are going to listen to a radio docudrama that reconstructs Charles Darwin's epic voyage. In the first part of this program, you will listen how this historic journey began, and this covers the account of Darwin's first year's trip. In the second part, you will listen about the rest of his voyage and how he took 20 years to complete the remarkable landmark book, Origin of Species.
You are going to listen to a young man's adventure of his lifetime. This almost a fable had led inexorably to solve the biggest mystery of all times. It is about the origin of adaptations, complexity, and the great diversity among Earth's life forms we see around us. This is the single most revolutionary idea of change over time in the history of biology, comparable only to Einstein's theory of relativity. This is the epic voyage of His Majesty's ship, or HMS Beagle, one of the most famous ships that ever sailed the seas. Charles Darwin meticulously collected evidences to conclude the Earth's living diversity, including humans, that has arisen by an organic process of descent with modification, evolution. And the central concept of this theory is that species are not fixed. They have descended from a common ancestor and then diverged, changing over time. And the natural selections is the driving mechanism whereby the best adapted individually of each population survive to leave offsprings and others don't. And this was one conclusion that could permanently, forever alter humanity's perception of its place in the natural order.
Our story begins on August 21, 1831. Then, Charles Darwin, a 22-year-old young man, was an insecure medical school dropout from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. He then enrolled as a divinity student at Christ's College at the University of Cambridge to study theology, so that he can become a clergyman. To complete additional elective credits, there his mentor, Reverend John Stevens Henslow, was a professor of botany and curator of Little St. Mary Church. Darwin attended Henslow's informal natural history soiree held on every Friday evening.
Professor Henslow wrote a letter to his favorite student to inform him that Robert Fitzroy, captain of ship HMS Beagle, was looking for an unpaid naturalist companion to sail with him on his next voyage.
My dear Darwin, I have stated that I consider you are the best qualified person I know of who is likely to undertake such a situation. I state this not in the supposition of your being a finished naturalist, but as amply qualified for collecting, observing, and noting anything worthy to be noted in the natural history. Do not put on any modest doubts or fears about your qualifications, for I assure you are the very man they are in search of. Your affectionate friend, John Henslow.
Mercurial and well-connected young aristocrat Captain Fitzroy wanted a man but more as a dining companion than a mere collector. And as an ideal protege, an expert in naval sciences, he would not take anybody, However, a good naturalist who was not recommended to him, likewise, as a gentleman, there never was a finer chance for a man of zeal and spirit.
2 weeks later, on 5th September 1831, 27-year-old Captain Robert Fitzroy and 5 years younger 22-year-old Charles Darwin met.
I'm sorry, just 5 minutes before you came, my friend had refused the offer.
And what's the offer?
Well, let me tell you that this voyage is going to be awful, uncomfortable, expensive, and perhaps not even completely around the world.
But I'm not deterred.
There is another candidate, Chesler. Well, he seems to have better qualifications. He knows his job well.
Oh, I see.
Anyway, my instructions are in this diary. I intend to carry the instructions in this letter.
Okay, I'll do that.
Do you think that will create a problem if two men have to share the same cabin? Do you agree?
Well, you are tall and I'm low weight. I'll almost disturb you.
Of course. I will be quite willing to share my cabin. Well, I assure that I will be minimal to your discomfort.
Probably no consequence to me. I assure you, I'll regard the cabin at all times as yours.
Good, good. Well, there may be 1,000 questions in your mind to ask me.
Yeah, my father is worried about the costs.
Well, your share of cost would be up to £500 to cover your preliminary expenses, and you would be free to withdraw at any suitable stage.
No, this is perfectly all right for me.
Okay. I see. You have a big nose. People say it is indicator of irresolution. That is, lack of determination and laziness.
Oh, what's wrong with my nose? Do you really think so?
But you have congenial manners, Cambridge tone, and you have ample scientific training.
Thank you.
So, I think we should go along.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Gentile Darwin did assume the role of a naturalist and thought of himself that way as the time passed by.
Soon after Christmas, on the morning of December 27, 1831, under the calm easterly winds and drizzly rain, the ship sailed out of Plymouth Harbour in England.
I'm leaving.
Lord, Thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever Thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, Thou
A crew of 74 men included captain and master of the vessel, Robert Fitzroy, first lieutenant, John Wickham, second lieutenant James Sullivan, the midshipman Philip Gidley King. Then there was the surgeon, Robert McCormick, the purser, George Rowlett, the draftsman and artist, Augustus Earle, and Conrad Martins, volunteer first class, Charles Masters, Admiral's instrument maker to tend the chronometers and naturalist companion Charles Darwin, nicknamed Philo, short for philosopher. Of similar age, the three shipmates Darwin, Wickham and Sullivan formed a firm friendship. To pass time on board, lying in his hammock, coping with seasickness, Darwin read a recently published textbook, The Principles of Geology, by Charles Lyell. Through fossils, this told a story, one that included the earlier existence of life forms no longer present. It suggested that the fossils found in rocks were actually evidence of animals that lived millions of years ago.
Captain,
Yes?
in your opinion, how was life on Earth created?
To be true, like most people, I believe in the biblical account. According to our holy scriptures, God created the world approximately 6,000 years ago. And all living organisms were created in their present day form. In book of Genesis chapter 1, it is written, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful. The Lord God made all.
But I don't think so. However, I agree with the conclusions of Charles Lyell.
So, what Lyell advocates?
Charles Lyell says that Earth's current physical form is the result of gradual forces, such erosions and volcanic activities, over a period of millions of years.
I consider it blasphemy. For God's sake, don't tell all these things to me again.
Charles Darwin completely failed to convince the captain about the gradual nature of Earth's change.
Because Robert Fitzroy was a mercurial aristocrat, an evangelist Christian with missionary zeal, and an avowed creationist, and Charles Darwin was totally divergent in his ideas about Earth and the life that inhabits it.
Darwin yearned for landfall events, but these did not come for several weeks. At Madeira Island, ship's first port of call, unfortunately, a westerly squall prevented the ship from making to the port.
Two days later, at the port of Santa Cruz, there a cholera epidemic was raging. Rather than wasting time in a quarantine before going on shore, Fitzroy simply sailed on.
Finally, on 16th January 1832, the Beagle anchored for the first time in the Cape Verde Islands, some 435 miles off the northwest coast of Africa. At chief port of St. Jago, Darwin bounded off the ship and saw direct evidence of Lyell's radical views.
I darted about beneath the coconut trees, looking at the rocks, the two sweet banana plants, the flock of strange guinea fowls. I was amazed that a cuttlefish could change color from purple to French grey. I put it in a jar in the hold of the ship. It glowed in the dark.
Crossing the equator and Atlantic on 28 February 1832, the Beagle reached at Bahia, now Salvador, a beautiful old town near the edge of the rainforest in Brazil.
The delight one experiences in such times bewilders the mind. If the eye attempts to follow the flight of a gaudy butterfly, it is arrested by some strange tree or fruit. If watching an insect one forgets it in the stranger flower, it is crawling over. If turning to admire the splendor of the scenery, the individual character of the foreground fixes the attention. The mind is a chaos of delight, out of which a world of future and more quiet pleasure will arise.
Passing through a stretch of sea which stained red because of millions of tiny creatures swimming about, few days later, on the evening of 4th April 1832, the Beagle docked at the magnificent harbour of Rio de Janeiro. Fitzroy kept the ship there for 3 months.
While on this trek, I spent much of my time thinking about how species in South America were similar to those in Europe. I found it odd that within such different environments, there exist the same types of animals. This conflicted with the notion that God created each species perfectly adapted to its particular environment.
Walking by himself in the exuberance of vegetation of tropical rainforest, Darwin was in transports of pleasure. It was a thrilling experience to watching the parade of so many creatures, flocks of brightly colored butterflies, aeronaut spiders, beetles alive in the sea, and so on. He recorded everything he encountered: the fireflies, the parrot, and toucans, sloths and alligators, shepherd dogs, a rare smaller species of rhea, gauchos riding, banded armadillo, the nomads, and the cowboys. His empty specimen jars began to fill up with hundreds of strange new creatures, such as crabs, octopus, and sharks, with T-shaped heads preserved in alcohol.
It was impossible to wish for anything more delightful than to spend some weeks in such magnificent country. In England, any person fond of natural history enjoys in his walks a great advantage by always having something to attract his attention. But in these fertile climates, teeming with life, the attractions are so numerous that he is scarcely able to walk at all.
The preserving alcohol has bleached much of their color, but some still have the numbered metal tags attached. They eventually became part of the Oxford University Museum of Natural History collection, who later loaned them to Australian National Maritime Museum.
On September the 18th, 1832, I started early in the morning, ascending a few hundred feet from the basin of green turf on which Bahia Blanca stands, about 400 miles southwest of Buenos Aires of Argentina. On 19th October, traveling further, I went about 30 miles across the bay to Monte Hormoso and found numerous fossils of smaller rodents.
Four days later, Darwin and Fitzroy took a small boat to visit a site called Punta Alta, meaning high point. Here, Darwin and his crew came across first real clue toward evolution. On its reddish mudstone cliff rising only about 6 meters, the exposed fossils were huge edentatal mammals, big shapes, unusual shapes, and also very abundant. The most famous of them was Megatherium, an elephant-sized ground giant sloth, as gentle as a lemur and as slow as incredibly slow snail. It was not even a living creature. It was a trough of fossils. Then there were Texodon, which related to the manatee, the sea cow, and the teeth of a Nava, an ancient horse, equaling in size and closely resembling to the present-day capybara.
I wonder why God destroyed the larger ones to replace them with smaller versions. Among the themes which are deeply impressed on my mind, more exceed in sublimity the primeval forests underfaced by the hand of man, whether those of Brazil, where the power of life are predominant, or those of Tierra del Fuego, where death and decay prevail. No one can stand in these solitudes unmoved and not feel that there is more in man than the mere breath of his body.
Voyage of Charles Darwin. You are listening to this program. Research and script Dr. Jitendra Singh. Artists Ashok Ojha, Rajshri Trivedi, Rajesh Kamboj and Rajat Sen Gupta. Recorded by Bati Langlingdo. Production, sound editing and direction by Ajit Horo. This program was presented by CIET NCERT.